In this class, we will go over the previous SSAA past questions. You'll find useful tips and tricks alongside the correct answers and solution for all the government questions. Like always, we'll be using the exam guide app. You can download and practice more past questions using this app. Let's get started. Now, the first question says, which political system allows only one ideology for the state? Is it A, socialism, B, aristocracy, C, communalism, D, capitalism? Now, the only one that allows one ideology, socialist ideology, in a state is socialism. Remember, socialism is a political and economic system which the means of production, distribution, and exchange of goods and services are owned and controlled by the state. So state establishes a particular ideology that will run the affairs of the state. Aristocracy has nothing to do with it because aristocracy is a form of government where royalties, where the privileged royalties, the best of the society, best few, actually rule the society. The C, communalism, is an ancient society that is based on full cooperation and working together of members of the society to achieve the goals of the society. So things are commonly owned. It's based on collectivism. While capitalism is economic and political system whereby the means of production, distribution, and exchange of goods and services are owned and controlled by private individuals. So private individuals have their own personal ideologies, but when you come in socialism where everything is centrally planned, it is run by one particular ideology for the state. So socialism is the answer. Then the next question says, in a representative government, citizens exercise their political power. A, directly. B, indirectly. C, in reverence for the political system. D, under undue political process. Now, remember, representative government is indirect democracy, a form of government that is based on elected representative, where elected representatives govern the people. So people exercise their political power indirectly. It is not directly. Directly is direct democracy, classical democracy that is outdated as a result of increasing population and complexity of modern state that does not permit direct participation of citizens in all the affairs of their citizens. So what we have is representative government, which is indirect democracy. So people exercise political power indirectly. Now, next one says, the essence of the concept of devolution is to cater for the interests of the. Now, the concept of devolution is a process where the central government transfers political power to component units, in most cases created by the central government. So the component units are given some level of autonomy to make some decisions that affect them. Now, which one does it cater for interest? Is it the ruling government? No. Is it majority? Is it minority? Is it rule of law? A says ruling government, B says majority, C, minority, D, the rule of law. Actually, it caters more for the interest of the minority, which is the reason being we can't go for majority because we can't be talking about the major ethnic group. They want minority interests. When you devolve power, you allow people to manage the affairs of their society in their own peculiar way. You are taking care of diversity, and when you take care of diversity, you are invariably taking care of reducing fear of domination of the minority, and you're taking care of the minority. Now, the next question says, a country's constitution may be derived from one of the following sources. Now, remember, constitution is the fundamental law by which a country is governed, a body of fundamental law by which a country is governed. Now, it can be derived from many sources, which includes judicial precedents, Act of Parliament, conventions and customs of the people, the history of the people, past constitutions, international documents, international conferences, international laws, and the rest of them. Now, if you look at A, it says educational elites. No. B says civil society organizations. No. C says civil disobedience against the government, boycotting the government. No. D, like I mentioned, customs of the people can be a source of constitution. Conventions, acceptable practices and routines of the people over the years can be a source of the provision of the constitution. So D is the answer. One major problem associated with the cabinet system of government is the, now, remember here we're talking about parliamentary. Another name for cabinet system is parliamentary system of government. Now, this is a system where the head of state is different from the head of government and where there's no clear separation of powers between the legislature and the executive, because members of the legislature are also members of the executive. Now, we are looking at a problem associated with the parliamentary system of government. Now, remember, there's one thing about parliamentary system of government. The head of government is the leader of the party that has majority seats in the parliament, and it is from there that the members, it is from the parliament that the members of the executive are made. And that is why we talk about parliamentary supremacy, because the executive is responsible not directly to the people, but directly to the parliament. That's why we talk about parliamentary supremacy in a parliamentary system of government. Now, peculiar problems parliamentary system can have. Let's look at it. A, abuse of power. B, is it frequent change of government? C, is it large number of ministers? D, is this supremacy of the executive? Now, of course, it can be supremacy of the executive because we talk about supremacy of parliament in a parliamentary system of government. Is it large number of ministers? It can be. It's having large number of ministers is not peculiar to a parliamentary system of government. Now, we have between abuse of power and B, frequent change of government. Now, we go for frequent change of government because this is peculiar to parliamentary system. Why do we have the problem of frequent change of government? Because of vote of confidence. When vote of confidence is passed, which is not as rigorous as impeachment proceedings. Remember, when you pass a vote of no confidence against the executive, the entire members of the executive will resign. So this system has a problem or can run the risk of frequent change of government because of this vote of no confidence that can be passed on the executive. Now, let's look at so that's the answer. Now, look at this. Representative government around the world pay attention to public opinion because of the following factors, except why would they pay attention to public opinion? Actually, this is testing your knowledge on the importance of public opinion. Remember, public opinion is the expressed view of citizens on issues, expressed view of members of the public or majority of citizens on issues of public importance or government decisions and policies. So why would government pay attention to the following? Which one is not the reason? One, A says protection of the government from media scrutiny. B, indication of government in good standing with the people. C, provision of feedback on implementation of government policies. D, national security concern. Now, why will government pay attention to public opinion? Which one is not? Now, of course, government will pay attention for national security concern when people express their feelings about national security, about killings, about insecurity in their states. Government can pay attention for national security concern. Government can pay attention because it provides feedback on implementation of policies. Now, it can indicate indication of government in good standing with the people. It indicates if government has good standing with the people, especially with respect to its policies. Now, it cannot protect the government from media scrutiny. No, public opinion will not protect government from media scrutiny. So this is the answer. Now, the determination and execution of government policies is the core function of the. Now, what does this? Now, remember first, execution of government policies is the primary function of the executive arm of government. Now, the executive arm of government does this through a particular people, the department of government, the ministry of government. And what is that ministry? We are talking about civil service. Remember, the civil service is an administrative body of government under the executive arm of government, responsible for the formulation and the execution of government policies. Now, it's not Public Complaint Commission, which is ombudsman. Now, this is the body responsible for receiving complaints against the public on the abuse of rights by the civil or public servants. Now, it's not Public Service Commission, which is the body that recruits public servants. It is not the Judiciary Service, which is the body that advises the body that advises the government on appointment and promotion of judges. So it is the civil service who is responsible for determination and execution of government policies. Now, public corporation, which is public enterprise, also has a legal personality, which means we talk about a legal entity. One of the features of public or characteristics of public corporation is a legal entity. And what does legal entity mean? When a body is a legal entity, it means that that body can sue or be sued on its own. So, of course, B is the answer. We can't say is A, which is no legal suit can be brought against. Of course, you can bring legal suit against public corporation. C say it has ultimate power to make its own laws. It's not what makes it a legal entity. Now remember, it operates based on the powers given to it by the act. That's the law establishing it. D, there is a legal department that represents it. It's not what it means. So it's B, it can sue and be sued. So it can take somebody or anybody to court or group, and also anybody or group can sue it to court. Now, local government authorities may not receive cooperation from the local people to the issue of, is it A, top-bottom approach to development, no, B, accessibility to internet facilities, no, it's a lack of support for the ruling government. D, non-availability of spiritual centers, of course, is lack of support for the ruling government. So it may not receive cooperation from local people on the case of lack of support from the ruling government. Now, delegated legislation can be controlled by, remember when we say delegated legislation, we're referring to those laws made by other bodies other than the legislature, but sanctioned and approved by the legislature. We're talking about transfer of lawmaking power to local authorities other than legislative from the legislature. Now, there are many ways, of course, to control delegated legislation. We can use parliamentary control. We can also use executive control, public opinion, media, press. So we can use this. So let's look at how the option says report writing, press conference, parliamentary question times, threat of secession. Of course, we can use parliamentary. This is parliamentary control because the parliament has the right to call the these bodies that have been empowered to make these laws, to ask them questions on some of the rules that they have made. The parliament has the right to call the minister, for the minister to give explanation on some of its policies, which are some of the rules, and these rules are what we call statutory provisions. So it's parliamentary question time. One-party system imposed by law with all other parties prescribed is. Now, this tests your knowledge on party system. Remember, we have one party, we have two-party system, we have multi-party system. We even have zero-party system where you have independent candidates. Now, one-party system in question is a party system or practice, political practice, where only one party dominates in a polity or is allowed to operate in a political system. Now, we have two types of one-party system. We have de facto one-party system and we have de jure one-party system. De facto one-party system is where you have other parties existing in a state. The law permits the existence of more than one political party, even at times multi-party system, but you find out that one political party dominates the political system in a state. So when you have that, it's de facto. So one party uses its force, its power to dominate and will always win all the elections in the state. The other one is de jure, one-party system. This is, whenever you hear de jure in government, it has to do with lawful. So de jure is when the law itself establishes that there will be only one-party system, which in this case, we have seen it in socialist country, fascist country, totalitarian states. Now, which one is the answer? It's a one-party system imposed by law. A, socialist party system. B, a de jure one-party system. C, a communist party system. D, an elitist party system is a de jure one-party system. Multi-party system is saddled with the problem of, is testing your knowledge on multi-party, where, multi-party system is a party system where more than two political parties are allowed to operate in a state. Example, like Nigeria, where we have over 60 political parties operating. Now, there are many problems of this party system. The major being division. It divides the country, it factionalizes the country. Now, if you look at options, A has to do with divisiveness, which is what I just said. B is limited choice. C, weak opposition. D, political consciousness. Of course, is divisiveness because it divides the country along party, alliance, and support. Now, one of the importance of voting in a democracy is that that's testing the importance of citizens participating in voting process. One of the importance is A, less expensive. We don't talk about expenses in voting. B, endures development for all voters. No. C, commits citizens to a political system. D, ensures winner takes all policy. That is, of course, commit citizens, because voting is an obligation, a political obligation. It is also a political right of citizens. So when citizens exercise this political right of voting, what happens? Citizens are committed to their political system. Now, an electoral system with the electorate elects a small group of people who in turn elects political office holders is known as. Now, this is testing your knowledge on the types of election you were taught in SS2. Remember, we have what we call general election, where election holds in all parts of the state simultaneously. We have direct election, where citizens vote by themselves who they want to elect them. We have indirect election, where citizens vote for a group of people called electoral college, who will in turn vote for the representatives of the people, which is indirect election. We also have by-election, where election is held to fill a vacant seat in the parliament. Of course, we also have the second ballot system, where there is no winner in an election, and you hold a second ballot system for a winner to be declared. From what I've explained, you see that an electoral system with the electorate elects a small group of people who in turn elects political office holders is known as, of course, electoral college. That is the indirect election which uses electoral college. It's not the second ballot system which takes place when there is no winner. It's not general election, which I explained. It's not local election. Now, most pressure groups, especially in West Africa, fail to achieve their goals as a result of this. Is testing you on the knowledge of pressure group. Remember, pressure group is an organized interest group that seeks to influence government policies and decisions in the interest of their members. Now, it's testing further the problems pressure groups can encounter. Now, let's look at this. Pressure group, good governance cannot be their problem. Because with good governance, the interests of their members are taken into consideration. Now, B, charisma of the president. It has nothing to do with their problem. Transparency of the legislature. It has nothing to do with their problem. Now, when they have corrupt leaders, their interests will not be protected because government can bribe them not to actually push through for the interests of their members. So corrupt leadership is a problem a pressure group can encounter. Now, a pressure group which resort to violence as a means of pressing home its demand is described as, now this tests your knowledge on types of pressure groups. You know, we have promotional pressure groups that is not there for the interest of members but public. You know, we also have religious pressure groups for the religious interests of their members. We have professional that protects the professional interests of their members. Now, we also have what we call anomic pressure group. Now, anomic pressure group is a pressure group that erupts spontaneously with the aim of using violence to actually achieve their goal. And once they achieve it, it ends there. The group ceases to exist. You normally see this group whenever you have riot, whenever you have mob actions. Now, anomic pressure group is the answer. Because we say a pressure group which resort to violence is seen anomic. Associational does not use violent method. Labor agitation, of course, they will go on strike or use other means. We don't have attitudinal pressure groups. Now, let's look at this question. Press control is necessary for a state, particularly in the era of where do you need to remember in a democracy we need freedom of press. Very important because it promotes freedom of expression. Now, there are cases, this question tests whether you are aware that there are cases where press can be controlled and under what circumstance can the government put a control on the press. Number one is it A, the economy? Is it B, Auditor General's report? Is it C, state security and secrets? D, foreign trade. Now, government cannot control the press because of the economy, and we need the press in the economy. B, Auditor General's report, of course, is Auditor General of the Federation. The report can be made public. C, state security and secret. D, foreign trade. It has nothing to do with. Now, whenever there is need to keep state secrets, and when we are talking about security concern that the government will not allow to come out, because when you're dealing with issue of state security, of course, there must be things the government must be kept secret from the public, and that is where this press control comes in. This question still talking about mass media. The media help to enrich discourse on national issues through its. Now, we are talking about how do they promote discussion where people review, discuss, aid their opinion on national issues. How do they enrich that? Now, do they enrich that through marketing? No. Do they enrich that through editorial comments? Do they enrich that through sales and advertisement? Do they enrich that through correspondence? Now, let's look at B and D. Now, correspondence has to do with reports from members of the press, reports about incident that happened. Our correspondents hear from our correspondents, from Abuja, from this. Now, this person will give eyewitness report of a particular incident or what he or she observed there. Now, the editorial comments, which you normally see in a newspaper, this is where people air their views, talk about what they think about public issues. Letters to the editor, you see people writing and talking about airing their views about one public matter or the other. Now, this is the area that can enrich discourse, people to participate in national issues. So, editorial comments is the answer, B. Information dissemination and communication in a political environment had been made faster and easier with the advent of educated practitioners, No, they have been there even before this. Now, is it press censorship? Of course, when you censor the press, you limit the press. It cannot report everything it has observed. Is it C, government spokesman? No. Of course, social media. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, and other social media platforms. So they have actually helped in information and communication in our political environment. Now, the passing of law by an arm of government to regulate society is the function of the who passes the law is the legislature that passes the law. So it's not the judiciary interprets the law. The executive executes or implements the law. Now, in lawmaking process, the executive has a role giving assent, that is signing to the law, but the passage of bill into law is what we are talking about. It's done by the legislature that is responsible for lawmaking. Now, militant nationalism in British West Africa after World War II sought to militant nationalism. Now, this question tests your knowledge, one, on nationalism, reaction against colonial rule, and also the push for independence by people of a particular nation that are under colonial rule. Now, another one it tests you is types of nationalism. Now, we have what we call proto-nationalism, which has to do with people seeking to participate in the affairs of their state. Now, we have militant nationalism. This one has to do with that quest for independence. They want to be free from any form of colonialism. From what I've explained, it's not about killing British national, which is A. It's not C, to stop the export of raw materials. No. It's not D, to stop the denigration of African culture. What militant nationalism sought, and especially nationalism after World War II, the Second World War, is to overthrow nationalism. And that overthrow nationalism is about independence. Proto-nationalism, of course, in the previous one I just mentioned, proto-nationalism was a movement limited to the demand for. Now, in stages and types of nationalism, of course, it started with resistance stage. Resistance stage when the traditional rulers, when the middlemen were resisting because their position in the society was threatened. Now, we also have this proto-nationalism. Now, this is the era where people, the members or those who are being colonized, sought for participation, let them be part of their government. Now, this was limited to the demand A, immediate end to colonialism. No, that is militant nationalism. B, reforms for political class and respect for African religion. No. C, Western education. It's not Western education, but rather D, social amenities and political participation. That is what proto-nationalism sought. Now, youth movements across British West African territories served as a springboard for the formation of political parties that champion the cause of self-rule. Now, youth movement, Lagos youth movement. This question tests your knowledge on origin of political parties. The Lagos youth movement metamorphosed into Nigerian youth movement, the second political parties that came into existence in Nigeria in 1935. So even Ebe Omo Oduduwa that metamorphosed into action group is also youth movement for the cultural group of that's preservation of Yoruba culture. So look at this next question. A country's foreign policy is foremost driven by. Remember, this question tests your knowledge on foreign policy, which when we talk about foreign policy, we are referring to the principles, standards, norms, rules that guide the nation's interactions with other nations and has stand on any international question. that comes up. And specifically, this question also tests you on the factors that influence foreign policy. But it's talking about the foremost. Now, all these options, A, economy, of course, it influences a country's foreign policy. B, location of the country, it influences foreign policy. That is why in Nigeria we talk about Africa as a centerpiece of Nigerian foreign policy. And you see the role of Nigeria in forming AU, which is a regional organization, and sub-regional organization like ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States. The national resources of a country can influence foreign policy. You see, Nigeria's decision to join OPEC in 1971 was informed by her national resources, which is crude oil. Now, D says national interest. Actually, the main driver, number one driver of a nation's foreign policy is national interest, which is the goal of a country, is the national goal of a country. So any country looks at what it benefits it first, which is national, how it promotes the goal, the objectives of the state. It looks at it before taking that policy. So to this extent, D, which is the national interest, is the answer to this. Then the first interterritorial political movement organized in the 1920s, which sought to bring all the British West Africa territories together to fight the colonial establishment, was of course, the first interterritorial, that of British West Africa, is National Congress of British West Africa that was formed by H.O. Davis. So it's C. Now, the African Union was unable to play its role on the global political scene very well due to, now it's talking about a problem of African Union. That's what it's testing your knowledge on. An inadequate system of education bequeathed by the colonialists is not really the problem of African Union. Is it low level of wages in the member countries, what they pay? A member country is not really a problem of African Union. C, divided loyalty among member states. D, outbreak of pandemic on the African continent. It's not only in African continent that we see pandemic. Even COVID-19 pandemic didn't start from African continent. It originated from Asia, in China precisely. But the problem of African Union, which cuts across most or all the international organizations, is divided loyalty among member states. Why? This is because member states of African Union belong to other international organizations, and some of them are committed more to other international organizations because of their roles in this international organization. So there is this divided loyalty among member states. So it's a major problem of one of the major problems of African Union. Now, this question says, which of the following options does the Commonwealth of Nations commit resources to? Now, this tests your knowledge on the principles of Commonwealth. Now, when you talk about principles of Commonwealth, now, use of a common currency is not a problem. It's not what Commonwealth commits itself to. It's not among the principles of Commonwealth. Superiority of the British Crown is not among the principles of Commonwealth. C, British leadership on all matters of diplomacy is not a principle. It's not what Commonwealth is about. Now, Commonwealth actually aims to promote democracy, and that is why democracy is one of the cardinal principles of Commonwealth, that members, to continue to be members, must practice democracy. And they are also committed as a principle to human rights. That is why Nigeria was suspended during Abacha's regime from Commonwealth for the killing of the 5 Ogoni people. Now, so the answer is promotion of representative government, democracy. Which summit drew the roadmap for the implementation of African Union? Now, African Union actually was brought about by different summits. Now, first we have the Sate Summit, Sate Declaration. The Sate Declaration was done in 1999. That was in Libya. It was in this declaration that they announced declared African Union. But it didn't stop there. This was in 1999. In the next stage is drawing of the Summit Constitutive Act that drew the roadmap for African Union, which is the Lusaka Summit in Zambia. Now, Lome Summit also worked in 2000. It was the Lusaka Summit that actually drew the roadmap, drew the Constitutive Act of the African Union. So this is the answer. Lagos Summit came later. So it's not bad. So it's the Lusaka Summit in Zambia that actually drew the roadmap, because that's where the Constitutive Act, the Constitution of the African Union, was drafted. Now, one of the benefits which West African states derive from United Nations is A, equal opportunity of appointment to its highest office. B, permanent membership of the Security Council. C, greater access to all the organs of United Nations. D, total eradication of poverty from Africa. Now, of course, you can't talk about total eradication of poverty from African continent. United Nations can't do that. Now, equal opportunities to appointment to its highest office. Yes, this is the benefit. Nigeria has equal opportunities. And Nigeria has become the chairman of United Nations General Assembly. A Nigerian is currently the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations. So a Nigerian stands the chance of being United Nations Secretary General. Now, of course, Nigerians, we have 5 permanent members of the Security Council. That is, we talk about US, Russia, France, China, and United Kingdom, Britain. So these are the 5 permanent members. So Nigeria can't talk about being a permanent member. Greater access to all the organs of the United Nations. Okay, but the main one is equal opportunity. Nigeria has equal opportunities with other countries in this A. Now, Atlantic Charter gave birth to. Now, this tests your knowledge on the history of United Nations. Now, remember, the history of the United Nations is traceable, 1, to the League of Nations that was formed after the First World War, the First World Organization. 2, the Second World War that broke out in 1939. And we saw that the Second World War gave rise to the collapse of League of Nations. And during the Second World War, the Allied nation led by the President of the United States of America, President Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill of United Kingdom, they came aboard at the Atlantic Ocean, where they came up with the Atlantic Charter. The aim, why they're fighting for war, the war aims. And it is this Atlantic Charter that gave rise to United Nations. So Atlantic Charter gave birth to United Nations. Now, which of the following factors does not influence a country's foreign policy? It also tests your knowledge on foreign policy and factors that determine a nation's foreign policy. Is it human resources? Is it geographical? Okay, let's look at it. Geographical location, of course, it influences a country's foreign policy. Like I told you before, Nigeria is in Africa, and that's why Nigeria adopted Africa as a centerpiece of Nigerian foreign policy. The human resources in a country, of course, has a bearing on the economy of the country, which can influence a country's foreign policy. D, which says international laws and conventions which a state is committed to can influence its foreign policy. Of course, system of education and number of universities has nothing to do with the foreign policy. That is the rules, the standards, the principles guiding a nation's interaction with other countries. System of education and number of universities has nothing to do with it. Now, in which system, political system does the government control every aspect of citizens' life? Now, this topic can be found in SS1 scheme. Now, where do you talk about control of every aspect of citizens' life? Now, is it in communism? Actually, we see it in communism. Is it dictatorship, where one powerful person lords it over all the members of the state? Is it aristocracy, where nobles rule, the gifted ones? Now, C says totalitarianism. Now, totalitarianism, of course, is a political system where every aspect of citizens' life, including education, is being controlled by the state. Now, it's totalitarianism. Now, communism is a variant of totalitarianism. So the answer directly is totalitarianism. Now, the administrative head of ministry is the, now this tests your knowledge on civil service. Remember, civil service, the ministry, talks about we have political head, which is the minister at the federal level, commissioner at the state level. Now, these are the political appointees. Now, we have the ones that are administrative head, that are bureaucrats in the civil service. Now, these are people we call permanent secretary. Now, general manager is the administrative head in public corporation. That's B cannot be answered. A, which is official of the ruling government. Now, official of the ruling government can come in if you're testing political head of the ministry and you don't have minister in your option, then official of the ruling government can come in. Now, chief coordinating officer is not even an office in the civil service. So C, permanent secretary, is the answer. The sovereignty of a state can be limited to a great extent by, remember, sovereignty is the supreme power of a state to make and enforce laws within its territory without any form of external interference. Now, it's not possible for a state not to have any form of interference from external forces. And this is where limitation to sovereignty comes in. Now, this question tests you on that limitation. Now, can rule of law, A, limit sovereignty? Can separation of powers of government limit sovereignty, which is B? C, can international laws and conventions limit sovereignty? Of course, it's one of the factors that can limit sovereignty. Now, when a state belongs to international organizations, there are laws that actually guide the activities of the state in relation and what they do at the international political scene. Now, these regulations are international laws. These international laws affect the sovereignty, the supreme powers of the state. And that is why, if you belong to a system, an international organization like Commonwealth, it is expected that you must respect rights of citizens. And that is why there was pressure when Nigerians wanted to execute the Ogoni activists. And when they eventually did, remember what happened? Nigeria was suspended from Commonwealth of Nations. So international laws, commitment to it by a state, limits sovereignty of a state. Now, the next question, coalition government is a common feature of, now it tests, this question tests your knowledge of what coalition government is. So it tests your knowledge of a particular system of government. Now, what is a coalition government? A coalition government is a government where two political parties merge to be able to obtain majority of the seats in the parliament in order to form a government. Now, you normally see it in a parliamentary system of government where it may not be possible for one particular political party, especially where you have multi-party system, one particular political party to have majority seats in the parliament. Now, when one particular party fails to form majority seat in the parliament, other political parties will join. Or maybe the party that has the highest number of seats in the parliament can come and merge with another party, but they still maintain their different identities as separate parties. They can come together and form a government. This government that is formed by these two political parties is what we call coalition government. Now, is it a feature of a two-party system? No, it can't be a feature of two-party system, because when you have two-party system, one party must have majority and the parliament. So you can't talk about coalition. Look at this here. When you have non-party system, which is zero-party system, where you have independent candidates, of course, you can't be talking about coalition government here. You can't be talking about a party that will have majority seat. See, one-party system, you can't talk about it. If it's one party, then that party automatically forms the government. But like I said, it can feature where you have multi-party system, which will make it difficult for a particular party to form the government. Now, the appointment of judges is based on the recommendation of the... Now, this tests you on the judiciary as an arm of government. How are they appointed? Of course, we know that the president, the chief executive, appoints members of the judiciary, especially the judges. Now, but how does of course, the legislatures will approve. But before, how will the president know the right person to be appointed, the chief justice of the country, to be appointed as judges of Supreme Court, to be promoted in the judiciary? Of course, the president will not sit in his office and do it. A body recommends. It's not the civil service, which is A. Civil service is different. In civil service is even the executive. Now, it's not public service, which has to do with even the civil service, but it's a broader concept. It has to do with all the agencies of government and departments. Now, is it eminent persons in the society that we just recommend? No. It's the Judicial Service Commission, which is where we have the bench, the judges. It is a commission organization that is made up of the judges, the judiciary proper. So is this body that can recommend to the president the right person or right persons to be appointed as judges. Now, this question 37 says, which of the following options is not a function of political parties? Now, let's start from D. This is aggregation of interest. It's one of the functions of political parties. They aggregate interest, that bring interest together. Interest of people with similar interest, especially ideology. Interest to control and form the government. C says political education. Of course, it's their major function. Politically educating the citizens through their campaigns, through their jingles, through their debates. They inform citizens. Is it political socialization? Remember, political party is one of the main agents of political socialization. So political socialization is somehow related to political education, which political parties do. Now, political parties, this option, political implementation, which should be policy implementation, is not by political parties. It's when they become the government. It's government that implements policy, the executive arm of government. Political implementation or policy implementation is the government, not political parties. Even parties not in power, they have no business with implementing. So it's when political parties come into power that they begin to implement policy. So implementation, anything implementation is not for political parties. It's when they become government, when they achieve that their aim, that the government itself is not a party now. The government itself, through the executive, will begin to implement policies of government. Now, in an election, secret ballot is described as a process where the voter, remember, it tests your knowledge on the types of ballot system. We have open ballot, where the voter's choice is known to the public. We have secret ballot, where the voter's choice is not known to the public, voter's choice of candidate or party. Now, in the process where voter A is screened off to conceal the vote. You screen off voter. B, cast votes in a sealed box. C, is assisted to cast vote. D, is searched before casting the vote. Is cast vote in a sealed box. That is ballot box. Now that seal will make you not to know the option, the choice of the voter. In which system of government does the legislature pass a vote of no confidence in the government? Now, it tests your knowledge on the two major systems of government, especially in terms of relationship between arms of government, which is the parliamentary and presidential. Another name for parliamentary is a cabinet system of government, which we also call the Westminster system of government. Now, in which one does the legislature pass a vote of no confidence? Of course, it's not federal. Federal has nothing to do with this. It's cabinet system of government, which is parliamentary system of government. In a presidential system of government, the legislature uses impeachment. It passes impeachment proceedings against the executive. It's in cabinet system that you talk about vote of no confidence. It's not de jure, it's not monarchy. Now, the concept of social justice implies that the state must ensure A, sharing of political power with opponent. B, security of multinational businesses. C, equality of citizens. D, fairness to foreign national. Of course, social justice demands that the states must ensure equality of citizens. Now, the next question says, the basic human rights of citizens in a state are the basic. A says freedom of movement, free education, and free health. Is free education a basic human right? No. B, free social services, speech, and religion. Of course, free social services is not basic because even social services, the government can charge at subsidized rate. Now, C says right to life, liberty, and property. D says right to higher education. Of course, you pay to go to higher education, so it's not a basic right. Property and freedom of thought. So the option that has basic rights only are right to life, which is the most fundamental of all the rights, liberty, and the property. So option C is the answer. So you see why these ones, even though some of them have one or two basic rights of citizens, but this one is the main one, C. All of them are basic rights. In A, you see that free education, free health may not always be there. Then free social services in B may not always be there. At times, the government can only subsidize. D, right to higher education is your money that will take you to higher education, so it's not a basic right. Then, a quasi-federal structure is so arranged for now, we have federal, we have quasi-federal structure. Now, quasi, the prefix quasi, refers to something that looks similar to, but not exactly. Now, in Nigeria, we had a quasi-federal structure during Macpherson Constitution of 1951. Now, we had, yes, the central government. We also had a component that's the regions. You see that the central government still has some levels of control, even in some of the lawmaking processes of the component unit, that's the regions. So why do we have a quasi-federal structure? That's what they're asking you. A, center to coordinate national level programs. B, commoning units to break away at will. Of course, it's not to. C, citizens to have dual allegiance and dual citizenship is not written. D, president to amend the constitution at will. Is A, the center coordinates national level programs. So that's why you have the quasi-federal structure, so that central government can coordinate matters that are of national importance or of national interest. Now, this question next, when a superior court declares an action of the executive or travaris, say Latin word or travaris, it means that, of course, A, the executive should leave power. No. Whenever they declare, the court declares action or travaris, does not mean you should vacate power. B, a vote of no confidence has been passed on government. No, it does not mean, it's not what travaris means. C, the judiciary is more powerful than the executive. It does not, it's not what it means. Rather, D, the action is illegal of no effect. Now, when an action is rendered or travaris, declared or travaris by the court, it actually means that the body exercising that power does not have the power, the law does not give it that power to actually carry out that action. Therefore, that action becomes illegal and of no effect. That's the meaning of travaris. Now, which of the following portions does not constitute the main objectives of United Nations? Now, this question actually tests your knowledge of United Nations, especially with respect to the objectives of United Nations. Now, the first one says maintenance of international peace and security. This is number one goal, number one of international and United Nations. So it can be the answer. 2, promotion of the well-being of the people of the world. C, international cooperation. D, the use of force to comply with its provisions. Of course, D, which is the use of force to comply with its provisions, is not the reason for the establishment of United Nations. Of course, United Nations want to boost international cooperation, federal relations, economic advance and social advancement of people of the world, protection of human rights, and serving as a forum where people of the world can discuss their problems jointly or international problems jointly. So use of force is not part of the objectives. Now, the Economic Community of West African States was established with the following aims, except to. Now, this question tests your knowledge of the objectives of ECOWAS. Now, A, use of force to dispose unconstitutional regimes. No, the ECOWAS does not aim to do that. ECOWAS is an economic organization. Of course, it aims to improve the standards of living of the people. B, it contributes to the progress and development of African continent. D, fosters relations among member states. These are the aims, but to use force to dispose unconstitutional regimes is not an aim of ECOWAS. Now, the process of international integration arising from the interchange of worldviews, products, ideas, and other aspects of culture is known as, of course, it's not national interest. Now, this question tests your knowledge on interactions among the world, that is international relations. Now, it's not national interest, rather it's globalization. It is just defined what globalization is. It's not geopolitics, geographical politics, not interest aggregation. No, rather it's globalization. Okay, now the next question, which says one negative effect of colonialism on the people of West Africa over the years. Now, this question tests your knowledge on effects of colonialism, which when we discussed it in SS2, we have positive and negative effects. Now, A says introduction of modern ideas of governance. Of course, the democracy we know today, modern democracy, the system of government, most of them are bequeathed to us. The voting to elect our government, they are bequeathed to us by our colonial masters. B, creation of larger political units. Of course, example, Nigeria, prior to when we had what we have, called today Nigeria, we used to have independent ethnic group, independent nations that were running their affairs in their own ways. It is the colonial masters, colonialism, that brought us together, amalgamated us, and we now form a larger political unit. So this is a positive effect. D, development of political institutions. Of course, most political institutions we have today are bequeathed to us by our colonial masters. Now, the answer is C, change of socio-political system of living. We change the way we did things in the past. Social life, political life, that is what some of the pre-colonial administration, we don't have them now. Some of them have ceased to exist because we have now dumped our own and followed the ones they taught us. Now, the Council of Elders in pre-colonial political institutions of West Africa best served on the council as A, warriors of the state. No, they were not warriors of the state. Rather, the warriors of the state, you can talk about the age grades in Igbo pre-colonial society. Then you can talk about the armed forces established in the other pre-colonial society. Now, C, custodians of wealth of the state. No, they were not. D, representatives of the commoners. Rather, they were the go-between the gods and the people. Now, what do we mean by that? Remember, if you look at the functions of the age grade, the Council of Elders, you'll see that they perform ritual functions to appease the gods on behalf of the members of the community. So that's why they serve as a go-between between the gods and the people. Now, public corporations are struggling in West African states as a result of, now we are talking about problems of public corporation. Which one represent the problem? One, okay, let's start from D. Direct foreign investment is not their problem. Public scrutiny and accountability is not their problem. B, private-public partnership is not their problem. Now, A, heavy social and political costs of running public corporation is their problem. So there is political cost, there is social and economic cost of establishing and running public corporation. And finally, the following options are today the biggest threat to the democracy of West African states, except. Now, what are the problems, threat to the democracy of a country like Nigeria and other West African states? Now, election disputes and related violence is a big problem. Election dispute, you see that after elections, the dispute will go from tribunal, appeal court, Supreme Court, violence in election, military intervention. Of course, it has been there. In fact, Mali in Africa is currently under military administration. And Nigeria has had its own share of military rule. Youth unemployment, which has social and political effect, is a problem. The non-involvement of traditional rulers in politics is not the problem of democracy in Africa. After all, even with the reform of local government, traditional rulers were insulated, were removed from politics. So D is the answer. So we have come to the end of OBJ.